Josh McDowell, Chip Ingram, and more than 60 other speakers at Southern Evangelical Seminary's 25th Annual National Conference on Christian Apologetics. It's October 12th and 13th in Charlotte, North Carolina. Homeschool and other discounts are available. Save more when you register by May 1st at ses.edu.
He's exactly the wrong person to have headed the most important law enforcement agency in the United States.
I was operating in a world where Hillary Clinton was going to beat Donald Trump. And so I'm sure that it was a factor. Like I said, I don't remember spelling it out, but it had to have been.
Donald Trump fired him because he didn't trust it. He was right, wasn't he?
I don't think he's medically unfit to be president. I think he's morally unfit to be president.
When you read the stuff that's pouring out of his book, Donald Trump was absolutely right not to trust James Comey.
He began to believe his own press clippings, and it's the biggest danger in public life.
This is a man who is revenge-driven.
James Comey, a man of integrity? As far as I know, I don't.
One of the reasons I'm standing up for the president's civil liberties rights is because the ACLU has fallen asleep on the job.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Welcome to a brand new week of broadcasting here on Focal Point at American Family Radio. I am Brian Fisher, your congenial, convivial, and amiable and effervescent, as always, host. Great to be back with you. Missed being with you on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. On assignment for AFA, we had a reception in honor of our donors in the Wichita, Kansas area on Thursday night. Had a great evening with those folks. Really fun. But you know, the travel to Wichita by air is pretty cumbersome. You had to drive to Birmingham, then drive to Birmingham, get on a plane in Birmingham, and we flew to Atlanta, getting further away from our destination. Then from Atlanta, we were able to fly directly into Wichita. Return leg, we fly from Wichita into Houston. Then we fly from Houston into Birmingham, flying right over the top of Tupelo. Again, flying away from our destination, land in Birmingham, and drive back. So anyway, had to take one full day to get there and one full day to get back. Had a great time with them. Good to see. So a lot of old friends we saw there and met some new ones as well. It was just great. I want to thank Matt Barber for filling in for me so capably. Well, let's turn our attention to the Word of God as we begin a new week of broadcasting here. Our reading schedule, you can find it at pray.afa.net, pray.afa.net, has taken us to 1 Kings chapter 14. And remember, one of the things that we're learning from the book of 1 Kings that we're supposed to learn is what we are to look for in a political leader. What the writer of 1 Kings is doing is profiling the different kings that sat on David's throne, and we see the good things about them, and we see the bad things about them. So when we see the qualities, the good qualities that are highlighted by the writer, he's telling us, look, this is something for you to look for in a political leader. Now, we have the opportunity in our culture to actually choose our own leaders. This is virtually unheard of in human history, and it would be absurd, and it would be ungrateful of us not to acknowledge God's goodness to us and giving us a choice of our leaders by not becoming involved in the electoral process. We have an obligation to do that. I believe as Christian citizens, take the information that we learn from books like 1 Kings, apply that as a template to identify leaders that we may want to vote for. I think we have an obligation to be involved in the political process in just that way and exercise this marvelous, unprecedented, one of the few nations on the earth where we get to choose our own leaders and have since the republic was founded. Anyway, back to 1 Kings 14. We're in the middle of the section that deals with Jeroboam, who was the successor to Rehoboam. Under Rehoboam, the nation split. There's civil war. Well, there wasn't civil war because God stepped in and told Rehoboam, the king of the south, don't go to war because the northern kingdom, Israel, was seceding from the union. They seceded under Jeroboam's leadership. And Rehoboam wanted to go to war against them and reclaim them and restore them to the union. And God said to Rehoboam, don't want you to do it. This is from me. I've got a purpose in this. So don't do it. And for once in his life, Rehoboam actually listened to the Lord and went home. So Jeroboam became the king of the north, but he was an absolutely terrible, terrible king. Now, he got to a point in his life where he had a son, and his son was ill, and he wanted to know what was going to happen to his son. Is his son going to live, or is his son going to die? So he knows there's a prophet there. He knows he can't go to the prophet because the stuff that he's done. Ahijah is the name of the prophet. Ahijah is the one that prophesied that he would become the king. But Jeroboam knew that he'd been a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad king. And so he knew that Ahijah probably wasn't going to say anything good about him. Ahijah would see him coming and see him as a man that squandered this marvelous opportunity that God had given to him. He wasted it through idolatry and disobedience. And so Jeroboam said, look, I'm probably not even going to get an audience with Ahijah. So he sent his wife, dressed up as somebody else, to go into Jeroboam and pretend to be somebody completely unrelated. But the Lord tipped Ahijah off. He couldn't see, but he said, look, the wife of Jeroboam is coming to inquire of you, so be ready. So she showed up, and Ahijah busted her down right away. Why are you pretending to be somebody else? But he says, I have unbearable news for you. I am charged with unbearable news. We have a responsibility to give you difficult, hard news. Thus say to Jeroboam, because I exalted you from among the people, made you leader over my people, Israel, tore the kingdom away from the house of David, and gave it to you. I gave it to you. And yet you have not been like my servant David, who kept my commandments and followed me with all his heart, doing only that which was right in my eyes. So that's what we're to look for in a politician. These things are important to God in political leaders, that we look for men who will keep God's commandments and who do keep God's commandments, who follow God with all of their heart, and they only do that which is right in the eyes of the Lord. You find a guy like that, he's worth trusting with public office. But God says to Jeroboam, you have done evil above all who were before you, and have gone and made for yourself other gods and metal images, provoking me to anger, and have cast me behind your back. Therefore, behold, I will bring harm upon the house of Jeroboam and upon your kingdom. I will cut off from Jeroboam every male, both bond and free in Israel, and will burn up the house of Jeroboam as a man burns up dung until it is all gone. So it says, Jeroboam, you, your house, I would have given you a dynasty, but you squandered it through disobedience. Now I'm going to burn your house up like a man burns dung. And he says, what you have done, Jeroboam, you have cast me behind your back. And isn't that what our culture on the left wants to do? This is exactly the aim of people on the left. They want to remove all trace of God from public life. They want to remove all acknowledgement of God, all recognition of God and Christ from the public square. They want to stop every acknowledgement of God, public prayer, public acknowledgement of God, all those kind of things. That's what they are against. And God says, if they are successful, it will bring judgment on our house, on the house of our country, the house of God that he is trying to build here in our land. So these things become very, very important in God's eyes. So we want to pray back to God. And while we're praying, we want to think about praying for God's enemies as well, those who are enemies of the truth. Include them in our prayers. You know, we can pray these blessings into their lives, and God would say, look, I want to answer that prayer. I want to bless these people. What I'm going to have to do, first of all, is I'm going to have to judge them and discipline and shake them loose from their disobedience and bring them to myself. So every prayer we pray of blessing for somebody who's far away from God is in effect a prayer for evangelism, for God to do whatever work is necessary to open their eyes. Well, let's pray. Lord God, I pray that with the assistance of your Holy Spirit, that I and my family, that the listening audience of Focal Point and their families, everybody listening to the sound of my voice right now, that we may be like your servant David. I pray that we will keep your commands and follow you with all our heart. May we only do what is right in your eyes. I pray that we will never provoke you to anger or thrust you behind our back, May you find only good things in our hearts toward you, and find only things in us that are pleasing to you. We also pray for our community and nation. Purge us from our sins, from all idolatry and all detestable practices. I pray that we will not do evil in your sight, but that which is good in your sight. Amen.
The influence of media is so very powerful over a person.
American Family Association and the family of Anna Bright want to warn you about the Netflix program 13 Reasons Why.
I really feel in my heart with all my soul that that show contributed to her passing.
After binge-watching Season 1 of 13 Reasons Why, 14-year-old Anna Bright committed suicide in the same manner depicted on the show.
To portray suicide, first of all, as an option is not a good thing. To portray it graphically, it leaves you vulnerable to the enemy's attack, which I think it definitely did for our daughter.
She took a permanent solution to a temporary situation.
Help protect our teens by signing the AFA petition urging Netflix to pull Season 1 and cancel the upcoming Season 2 of 13 Reasons Why. You can see Anna's story and sign the petition at afa.net. That's afa.net.
The wicked flee when no one pursues, but the righteous are as bold as a lion. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. China's president struck a conciliatory tone when he promised to cut China's import tariffs and ease restrictions on foreign ownership in its auto industry, as President Trump has zeroed in on America's trade imbalance with China. China currently imposes a 25% tariff on imported cars, plus an additional 10% super luxury tariff on vehicles priced over $200,000. Don't look now, but it seems like President Xi has blinked in the face of President Trump's tariff stance. China will dance if they have the right partner.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner with Abraham Hamilton III, public policy analyst for the American Family Association. This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Brian Fisher here. Welcome back to Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on Conservative Talk Radio. Welcome aboard the USS Focal Point. It's a warship, not a pleasure cruise. Beginning a brand new week of cultural warfare. No shore leave until Friday, ladies and gentlemen. This week, man your battle stations as we begin today. I want to talk about this Jim Comey business. I've got a piece by Andy McCarthy, get to if I have time. But Andy McCarthy saying, look, this investigation, this raid of Michael Cohen's office, he says this represents an actual legitimate threat to Donald Trump because it is an outright, honest-to-goodness criminal investigation. And he believes that what the Southern District of New York, Comey's not even investigating this. This is being done by the Southern District of New York. Mueller made the recommendation. He offloaded the information about Michael Cohen and all that to the office of the Southern District of New York, kind of known as maybe the premier attorney general's office in the country. I mean, you got 93 of these, and the top of the cream of the crop work in the Southern District of New York. So these guys are serious about what they do. And Andy McCarthy does not believe that they would trump something up. I don't have the same level of confidence that Andy McCarthy does in anybody that's connected right now with the practice of law. I mean, this whole thing is just kind of rattled. The way you've watched the FBI conduct itself, James Comey and the others, I don't know. It's just shameful to me. And, it makes all of us, including me, wonder how can we trust these people to do what is good and right and pursue justice instead of pursuing a vendetta or instead of pursuing getting a president, which is what I think they're doing. I think it's what Mueller's about. He's not after justice. He's after Trump. And anyway, so the Southern District of New York, anyway, they're going after this Michael Cohen. But what Andy McCarthy is saying, look, anybody that is connected to this, anybody that is connected to Michael Cohen is in some kind of legal jeopardy. And he says, look, I don't think they had anything on collusion. I don't think they had anything on obstruction. There is nothing there to prosecute or to file charges or to impeach or whatever. But this deal where they are trying to make a case of criminal fraud against Michael Cohen could be a thing that snags Donald Trump if they collect evidence that Donald Trump was working together with Michael Cohen to carry out this fraud. Now, what he says is, look, non-disclosure agreements by themselves, there's nothing illegal about them, nothing wrong about that. But if you can demonstrate that the purpose of the hush money was to influence an election, then that becomes kind of a different kettle of fish. So we're going to follow this. I may come back to the story, give you more details. But Andy McCarthy, I trust this guy. He's a great writer, great thinker, great legal mind. You know, so if he says, look, this is the first time, and this is the first time I've seen Andy McCarthy write anything like this, the first time where he's indicated that Donald Trump is in some kind of jeopardy. And again, the question is, what in the world does this have to do with Trump's collusion with Russia? The answer is obviously nothing. So the only way this thing is even happening is that Mueller is coloring way outside the lines that were set for him in this special counsel investigation.
I'm just curious, Brian, would this be turned back over to the control of Jeff Sessions at this point? Because it's not to do with the collusion?
No, it's kind of under Jeff Sessions' bailiwick now because the Attorney General of Southern District of New York works for Jeff Sessions.
I see.
Works for him. Jeff Sessions is his boss. But you bring up an interesting point that I've been meaning to make for some time, and I thank Jeff, my outstanding producer, for bringing this to my attention.
I don't even know what I did.
But so the deal is, what Jeff Sessions did is he recused himself from everything that had to do with Trump's collusion with Russia. Yeah. So if it had to do with the campaign and the Trump campaign colluding, collaborating with Russia, then Jeff Sessions recused himself from all that because he said, I was part of the campaign. But he did not recuse himself from anything else. Yeah. So as long as it's about Trump and the campaign in Russia, Jeff Sessions says, I'm not going to intervene. But something like this is not about Trump and Russia. This is not about the campaign. So anyway, we'll see where all of this goes. And I'm sure James Comey, given the size of the ego that he has, was disappointed to read this. Fewer people watched his interview with George Stephanopoulos last night than both the Academy of Country Music Awards and the 60 Minutes sit-down with Stormy Daniels the previous month. According to Hollywood Reporter, ABC averaged about 9.8 million viewers. Stormy Daniels doubled that, had 24.5 million viewers, the highest-rated episode for 60 Minutes in the last 10 years. So anyway, he didn't get the audience, I'm sure, that he was hoping to get. Well, let's play some sound bites that deal with this that came from the interview that he had with George Stephanopoulos last night and some of the other things. Now, one of the questions that we have, for James Comey and to George Stephanopoulos' question, he asked Comey this question, is we know, and you know, that the dossier, the Steele dossier, the thing that was used by James Comey and the FBI to go get a warrant to surveil Donald Trump and his whole campaign team. That was rooted in the Steele dossier. Comey said, look, if we didn't have that, we could not have gotten a warrant. So the question, and remember, James Comey told us he went and briefed Donald Trump. His first meeting with Donald Trump was to brief him on the Steele dossier. Now, I don't think his agenda was just to bring him up to speed. I'm not exactly sure what his motive was. Maybe when we get to the phone call segment, you might have an idea for me. But I don't think that his motive was purely and simply to bring the president up to speed. I think he wanted to spook the president. I think he wanted to gig the president in some way to get him to take some kind of rash or impulsive action to try to knock this thing down that would discredit him. I think that's what Comey was up to try to prompt and poke the president into responding to this revelation that he was under investigation for cavorting with prostitutes in a hotel in Moscow. And actually what Trump said is, I would like you to go out and disprove this. I don't even want my wife to read about the fact. I don't want even there to be a 1% chance that my wife would see something like this and believe it. I want you to go out there and I want you to disprove this. I want you to prove that it never happened. And that, to me, by the way, is an indication of Donald Trump's innocence in that matter. Not going to be so aggressive about asking Comey to look into it if there's a chance that he's going to find out it actually happened. So that's kind of an incidental verification from my point of view that Donald Trump wasn't involved in the way that the dossier says he was. But anyway, it's a pertinent fact. It is a pertinent fact here that the dossier was funded by Hillary Clinton, and it was funded by the Democratic National Committee. They paid the money for this thing, and we're looking at millions and millions and millions of dollars. So it's naturally a question, Mr. Comey, when you talked to Donald Trump and you briefed him about the contents of the dossier, did you also inform him of the salient and important fact that his political adversary had funded this thing? Let's see how that exchange went.
Did you tell him that the Steele dossier had been financed by his political opponents?
No, I didn't even think I used the term Steele dossier. I just talked about additional material.
But did he have a right to know that?
That had been financed by his political opponents? I don't know the answer to that. It wasn't necessary for my goal, which was to alert him that we had this information.
Alert him that we had this information. Okay, why did you think that was important to alert him to the fact that we had this information? And remember, James Comey's the guy that refused to go out there and tell the nation that Donald Trump was not under investigation. Remember, he told that to Donald Trump. He told that back at the beginning of his term as president. January 2016, you are not under investigation. So we've known that. Trump has known that now for 2017 when he took office, for well over a year that he was not under investigation. We just found out here in the last month or two, formally, officially, that he was not under investigation, that he was a subject but not a target. Remember, we've been waiting for that information. Trump has known it all along, and he was frustrated with Comey, that Comey would not exonerate him before the nation. I would be frustrated too, because the impression was left among everybody that this had incriminating evidence about Donald Trump, that this investigation, that he was a target of this investigation. And Comey told him under no uncertain terms, you are not under investigation. And if you're Donald Trump, you want this guy, if he's going to tell you, why not tell the nation? I mean, what would keep you from telling the nation unless somehow it served some agenda that Comey had to try to gig Donald Trump or goose him or something like that? And I think it was his frustration on Trump's part that Comey would not tell the nation that its president was not under investigation. Do you think that's an important thing for an FBI director to reveal to the public? Absolutely. To clear up this misconception that he was the target of this investigation. But Comey wouldn't do it. Trump asked him to do it. He refused to do it. And Donald Trump finally lost patience with him and cashiered him, and wasn't happy with the job he did on the Clinton email investigation, whitewashed her, took a bunch of steps. We've talked about it before. I won't rehash those, but, gave her a complete pass on the email thing. And now he's going after Donald Trump with a buzzsaw. And Trump says, hey, where's the justice here? Where is justice and liberty and justice for all, including me? Where is that in this whole equation? Anyway, clip number 1, Stephanopoulos asks James Comey about the whole Hillary Clinton business. Let's listen.
At some level, wasn't the decision to reveal influenced by your assumption that Hillary Clinton was going to win and your concern that she wins? This comes out several weeks later, and then that's taken by her opponents to sign that she's an illegitimate president.
It must have been. I don't remember consciously thinking about that, but it must have been, because I was operating in a world where Hillary Clinton was going to beat Donald Trump. And so I'm sure that it was a factor. Like I said, I don't remember spelling it out, but it had to have been that she's going to be elected president. And if I hide this from the American people, she'll be illegitimate the moment she's elected, the moment this comes out.
Well, again, I guess that depends on how much you believe James Comey on this. Of course, it made Hillary Clinton furious. She believes this is why she lost the election. Talking here about his revelation, the letter that he wrote on October 28th, just 10 or 11 days before the election, that indicated the investigation into Hillary Clinton had been reopened. But then he closes it less than a week later and tells the nation what? That Hillary Clinton is not under investigation. She's not going to be prosecuted. Why could he not do the same with Donald Trump? It makes no sense to me unless James Comey had some secondary some secondary agenda that he was pursuing. But anyway, Comey indicates here, no, don't miss this, Comey indicates that he was influenced by the polls. He was influenced in his job by his belief that, by political factors, his belief that Hillary was going to win. We'll be right back with a special guest. Stay with us.
This is Dr. Richard Lamb, president of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bringing Every Thought Captive. During his confirmation hearings last week, current CIA Director and Secretary of State nominee Mike Pompeo was a model of grace under fire as he took on hostile questions from senators who obviously took exception to Mr. Pompeo's deep evangelical Christian faith. Mike Pompeo, first in his class at West Point, an Iraq war veteran and a Harvard Law graduate, former congressman, highlighted his commitment to human rights and religious liberty. In response to questions that he might be too hawkish on foreign policy issues, Mr. Pompeo's reply was an important reminder in a time when few in our Senate ever have actually served in the military. I quote, "I know firsthand the painful sacrifices of our men and women in uniform. So when journalists, most of whom have never met me, label me as a hawk, a hardliner, I shake my head. There are few who dread war more than those of us who have served in uniform. And there is a great deal of room between a military response and war. War is always the last resort. I would prefer achieving the president's foreign policy goals with unrelenting diplomacy rather than by sending young men and women to war." End quote. Indeed, it is those who have been in combat who most understand how horrific it is and want to do everything they possibly can to avoid their fellow Americans having to endure the experience. America would be in safe hands with Mike Pompeo as Secretary of State. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher
on American Family Radio.
Listen to the audio podcast or download today's program at afr.net. You can also read Brian Fisher's columns at afa.net.
afa.net.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Genial, convivial, and amiable as always. The program Focal Point is the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio. Want to welcome to our decision maker line a special guest, first-time guest here on Focal Point, Heidi Harris. Heidi Harris has a number of times been featured on Talkers Magazine's Top 100 Talk Hosts, went on there numerous times. 2014, she was named one of Nevada's distinguished women, had a 19-year career in commercial radio in Las Vegas, a lot of it on their CBS radio affiliate, News Radio 840 AM. And Inside Radio had a featured piece on what happened to Heidi. We're here to let her tell her own story. She's been a commentator. She's made appearances on Fox News, MSNBC, CNN, HLN, and RT America. Heidi Harris, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Thank you so much, Brian. I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, it's great to have you with us, Heidi. I got one question for you before we jump into anything else. Says you were on RT America. Were you ever on with Tom Hartman?
I was never on with Tom Hartman, but I was on with Ed Schultz a lot, and still am on occasion, because I used to do Ed Schultz show a lot when he was at MSNBC. And so when he went over to RT America, he started calling me to come over there.
Okay, well, terrific. Well, I was on with Tom Hartman a number of times. I was just wondering if your experience with Tom Hartman was the same as mine, wasn't exactly positive. I finally figured out with Tom Hartman what I had to do with him, because he would interrupt me. I wouldn't get 6 seconds of commentary out. He'd interrupt me with another question. I decided I'm just going to beat him to the punch. Every question he asks, I'm going to give him a 5-word answer. And it completely threw him off balance. He didn't know what to do. So anyway, it was kind of fun. Okay, well,
that's funny. Well, that's what you learn in cable news. You learn to be concise, because otherwise they're going to cut you off or something's going to happen.
Well, he'd interrupt me and talk over me. This is irrelevant to our interview here, so let me say this. We'll move on. But so I thought, well, I'll just keep talking. And that didn't work because he just kept talking, and he was the one that had control of the mic. So finally, I just figured out another strategy. Anyway, back to Heidi Harris and what happened to you. Heidi, tell us what happened to you. I mean, obviously, you've had a distinguished career in broadcasting. People know that you are a conservative. You make no bones about that. You pull no punches about that. You've had the success in your career because you've articulated views that resonate with people in your listening audience. So tell us what happened to you after 19 years of successful commercial radio in Las Vegas.
Well, I posted something online. To make this very brief, I had seen a picture that was being run by Clark County Family Services. That's our county here in Las Vegas. And they were running ads, I guess, looking for foster parents or adoptive parents. And like a lot of ads, there'll be different pictures that you flip through. Well, this one particular picture kept popping up. It was two men walking a little baby. And I just went crazy because I thought, you're trying to normalize something that's not normal. Now, can two men raise a child? Everyone knows they can, but two men can't have a child. And I just made the point that a kid deserves a mom and a dad. That's what a child deserves. And, of course, everybody went crazy. Now, the interesting thing about this, Brian, is I had mentioned this kind of thing on the air in the past, talking about women who specifically have children without fathers intentionally, and how I thought that was terribly unfair to the kids. So it was a consistent position. It wasn't an anti-gay thing. It was a pro-child thing. Even my boss wasn't worried because he said, well, you said that on the air. But as you know, social media is a totally different animal. So thousands of people who'd never heard me, never listened to the show, never planned to listen to the show, passed this thing around, screenshotted it, and came after me and said things I can't even mention on your show. And so, it was on. And you know how the people are nowadays with this kind of thing when it comes to the gay activists. They wanted my head on a stick, and they basically went after corporate. They went after my sponsors, not even my sponsors, but the sponsors who were sponsoring the FM stations in the same cluster. They went after everybody, complete slash and burn, and corporate backed down and tossed me out the door.
It's interesting. I'm looking here at the article from Inside Radio where they talk about you being booted, quote, end quote, from KXNT, meaning fired. And it's interesting, even in the headline, Heidi, they declared that your comments were homophobic. Now, I want to ask you a question here. Homophobic means you are afraid of homosexuals. The way it's understood is that you dislike homosexuals or that you hate them. That's what homophobic means. Let me ask you, are either of those things true, Heidi? Are you afraid of homosexuals or do you dislike them?
Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, one of my friends who's a gay radio guy in L.A. emailed me and he said, what's the controversy? Of course kids need a mom and a dad. And I heard from a lot of people, even those who didn't necessarily agree with my comments, they said they couldn't believe I got fired for that because aren't I entitled to my own opinion? But you know what's scary, Brian, and I know you covered this a lot. 5 years ago, that wasn't even a controversial opinion. Now people are even having a discussion about it. It makes you a hater because you think kids need a mom and a dad? How ridiculous is that?
Well, that's an indication, Heidi, that we're at a very, very dangerous point in our culture, I think. I want you to comment on this, where things are getting completely reversed, completely upside down. Isaiah talked about the time when that which is evil will be called good, that which is good will be called evil. You think about it, Heidi, since the dawn of civilization, the controversial point of view would have been, up until 5 years ago, like you said, the controversial view would have been that kids don't need a mom and a dad. Now, all of a sudden, you can lose your job for believing what is obvious to anybody who's got common sense.
Yeah, it's crazy. And never did I advocate in my comments that gay people have their kids wrenched out of their homes or anything like that. I never said that. And, a lot of people were upset. They said, well, you're quoting the Bible. I didn't mention the Bible at all in there. Even if people are unbelievers, kids need a mom and a dad. They need what only a mother and a father can provide. And let's be honest, most kids in foster care are there because of straight people who made bad decisions. We all know that. But bottom line, shouldn't we all look for the ideal? And that's what I was talking about. In the ideal situation, this is the best thing, especially for a baby in an adoptive situation. It's much easier to place a baby with a two-parent family, mom and dad, and that's what I advocate.
It's interesting, Heidi, talking here with Heidi Harris, who used to be for 19 years on commercial radio in Las Vegas on KXNT, got bounced after saying that kids need a mom and a dad, accused of being a homophobe, and bounced. And you know what I thought was interesting as I looked at your Facebook comment, Heidi, that got you bounced, is you placed the focus where I think it ought to be, and I'm going to ask you to respond to this. But what I find in kind of conversations with the homosexual activist community, their focus is entirely on the adults in the equation. We want what we want. We deserve what we're asking for. What we're asking for is equal rights to heterosexual adults. It's all about adults, adults, adults. And you brought another angle into the equation that I agree with you is paramount.
Well, I think it is important. I saw a story the other day where some woman who's 42 is fighting with her ex-boyfriend about embryos they created. She wants a child and da-da-da-da-da. And I'm thinking, you don't care about anybody but yourself. You don't care about what a child has, and it's the same thing sometimes in the gay community where they want what they want. They may be attracted to the same sex. Well, okay, I don't understand that, but you know, whatever, that's their thing. But bottom line, a child still needs a mom and a dad. So to take that away from a kid because that's your predilection and to deny that, I've had women say to me who were single parents by choice, and they've said, well, kids don't need a dad. How dare you? Mm-hmm. Of course kids need a dad. How dare you make that decision for your child? Gay or straight, how dare you decide that they don't need half of the equation? I think it's criminal.
Well, and you said in your Facebook post, I'm talking about what's best for the child, and you capitalize child, and that's what the county, that's Clark County Department of Family Services, should be promoting. So you're concerned, Heidi, if we take a look at this whole equation, all the people that are involved, you've got adults here that may want to adopt and whatever, and you've got the child. What should our primary concern be? And what you're saying is our primary concern ought to be, what is the best option for this child? You know, and I look at it this way. If you have a child that's up for adoption, then you're dealing with a child who has already experienced some kind of dislocating trauma in their life. They've had a breakup of their family of origin. That's the only reason they are available for adoption. The last thing that we want to do is put them anywhere other than in an optimal nurturing environment. And social research and social science, all of it indicates the best place is in a home where they can be raised by a mom and a dad that are married to each other.
Yeah, that's true. And I've heard people say who work in foster care that the reason they're trying to recruit gay foster parents is because they're having such a tough time getting straight couples to do it. Well, one of the reasons for that is a lot of couples get their hearts torn out when they foster a child for years on end. The parents are not fit, and then the courts give the kid back to the bio parent. So a lot of folks are just so disturbed by that, and they get their hearts broken, they just have given up on it.
One other question I want to ask you about, it's a response from Andre Wade. He's the executive director of something called the Center, which is the center of activism, apparently, for the LGBTQ community in southern Nevada. And he said about you and about this controversy, there is no place for hate, there is no place for discrimination, and there's no place for divisiveness. And I guess the question I had, Heidi, well, who is hating whom here? You're not hating anybody. You know, you're loving children. If anybody's hating anybody, it's the people that are out there, you know, banging on their pots and pans to try to get you fired.
The people with the pitchforks and torches. You know, it's so true, Brian. It goes beyond that a little bit. There was a guy, I wrote a book about a lot of things, including this. It's called Don't Pat Me on the Head. But I mentioned a quote that I received from somebody after this whole controversy, and he said something that's so important. He said, I shouldn't have to suffer hatred and bigotry because of who I love. And I said, well, let me tell you something, young man. You're not entitled to a world where everyone salutes your choices. When you walk out the door, somebody may not like the way you're dressed, what you drive, what you eat, what you wear. Everyone's going to have an opinion. Everyone's looking at everybody all the time. You don't have a right to have everyone salute your choices. But we have a lot of young people nowadays who have never even skinned a knee. They can't stand it if anyone disagrees with them about anything. And the problem with those people is, as we just saw with Laura Ingraham and those advertisers, that's going to be a very powerful group of consumers very soon if they ever leave home, and that's a factor.
Well, and Heidi, you know, he accused you of discrimination. Again, I asked the same question. Who is discriminating against you here? Who's the one that got vilified in public? Who's the one that lost her career? We talk about discrimination. Discrimination is getting fired because of what you believe. That's what happened to you. What about divisiveness? Everything was smooth. Everything was fine. Everything was copacetic You'd even said these things on air before. It wasn't until activists got a hold of this and made an issue out of it, they created this divisiveness. Well, Heidi, thank you for taking time to chat with us. And you've got a podcast. Tell us how we can get your podcast very quickly.
You can get everything at HeidiHarris.com. That's HEIDI, HeidiHarris.com. Thank you so much, Brian. I appreciate it.
Okay, God bless you, Heidi. Thank you for taking time to be with us, and may God take care of you and bless you as you go into your future. We'll be right back with your phone call. Stay with us.
Exposing Washington with Walker Wildman.
So who is responsible for the dysfunction in Washington? That's what we're going to be discussing today.
We have become one of the most litigious societies on the planet.
The goal of this show is to bring clarity to the news coming out of Washington, D.C., and to expose the deception that has plagued our nation's capital for decades.
Exposing Washington.
Each Saturday at 2:30 p.m. Central.
On American Family Radio.
All of heaven is filled with music, men and women. There are more hymns in the book of Revelation than any other book than the book of Psalms. And when we get to heaven, people say, what are we going to do? We are going to praise God in every conceivable way that is possible.
Join Dr. David Jeremiah for his series Escape the Coming Night, next time on Turning Point.
5:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
Did you know George Washington, the father of our country, he loved being at home at Mount Vernon. In fact, he said he'd rather be at home at Mount Vernon than dining with all the princes and royalty of Europe. Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. We're going to Mount Vernon on our Spiritual Heritage Tour in September, and we'd love to have you join us for this very special time. Stephen McDowell of the Providence Foundation will be with us as we go all over our nation's capital. We'll go to the Capitol, the Library of Congress, the World War II Memorial, the Lincoln Memorial, all the places you want to see in our nation's capital. We'll see that, but we'll also go to Mount Vernon. Now, for all the information on this September tour, including a side trip to Williamsburg, Jamestown, and Yorktown, you can check it out at spiritualheritagetours.com. spiritualheritagetours.com for all the information on our September tours. And we'll see you then.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Brand new week of broadcasting. We'll take your phone calls in this segment. Number to call if you'd like to join the program is 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Happy to talk with you about anything that's been in the news over the course of this past week. 888-589-8840.
And Brian, I just want to interject one bit of good news. Desi Linden has won the Boston Marathon. She's the first American to win that in 33 years. Wow. It's kind of a double win, though. This is great news, but a double win because the Boston Marathon had allowed transgender men to compete in the women's category, and she beat them as well. There were 5 of them that
five men that were running that race.
She won the race.
Beat them all. Yeah. Good for her. All right, that's the latest from the Boston Marathon. That is really, really good news. Number again to call is 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. And Rob, let's grab one more soundbite while people are calling in. Let's go to clip number 2. George Stephanopoulos asked James Comey about whether he thinks Donald Trump is qualified to be president. Let's listen to this.
But not in the way I often hear people talk about it. I don't buy the stuff about him being mentally incompetent or early stages of dementia. He strikes me as a person of above average intelligence who's tracking conversations and knows what's going on. I don't think he's medically unfit to be president. I think he's morally unfit to be president. A person who sees moral equivalence in Charlottesville, who talks about and treats women like they're pieces of meat, who lies constantly about matters big and small and insists the American people believe it, that person's not fit to be president of the United States on moral grounds. And that's not a policy statement. Again, I don't care what your views are on guns or immigration or taxes. There's something more important than that that should unite all of us, and that is our president must embody respect and adhere to the values that are at the core of this country, the most important being truth. This president is not able to do that. He is morally unfit to be president.
Okay, so morally unfit to be president. I don't think he's going crazy in the head. I don't think he ought to be subject of a 25th Amendment purge is basically what he's saying, removing him because he's incompetent or mentally disabled or something like that, but he is morally unfit to be president because of his lack of commitment to the truth. Now let's play clip number 3. This is Chris Christie. Chris Christie used to be in the federal prosecutory system, and he says, if this had happened when I worked for Jim Comey, if I had done what James Comey did, this is what he would have done to me. Clip 3.
Well, okay, George, when I worked for Jim, if I had said to him 11 days before an election that I was going to release information that could potentially affect the election, and one of the things that influenced me was polling, he would have fired me. He would have fired me on the spot. And it is really disconcerting to me as a guy who worked with him and for him and have defended him on this air and other places over the years to see this interview and what he was saying. It is exactly what they teach you not to do. And I think it's unfortunate that Jim's, who's a good guy, a good family man, a good person, and was a very good prosecutor, but he began to believe his own press clippings. And it's the biggest danger in public life. And the hubris that he shows in that interview is extraordinary to me and not the guy that I worked with or worked for, and it's sad.
All right, so Chris Christie's saying, well, you know, there are some other American values that we ought to look for in a politician, a public leader, civic leader. One of them is humility. I didn't see any of that in this interview with James Comey. What I saw was hubris. And what we believe in America is the rule of law. You have certain principles, you have certain rules, and you play by those rules. And James Comey didn't. I would have gotten fired for the things that James Comey did in this deal. He began to believe his own press clippings, his own ego got in the way. Well, that is a classic American value as well, not believing your own press clippings, not letting your ego get in the way. All right, let's go to the phones. Let's begin with Miriam in Texas. Miriam, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind today?
Shalom, Brian.
Shalom.
All I wanted to say was everybody has a mother and a father. You cannot create a child without a mother and a father, and that is always what I've been taught in biology, regardless of what people think. And by the way, we have many prayers for you.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that very much, Miriam. Thank you. And you know, we had that flight to Wichita, and it was, you know, it was kind of a draining flight because you got one full day to get there, one full day to get back, and I kind of weathered the storm pretty well. So I appreciate your prayers. I think a lot of that's due to the fact, Miriam, that people like you have been praying for us. You know, and I don't want to minimize this point that Miriam is making because it's exactly right. She is exactly right. When people talk about kids having a mom and a dad, Miriam's point is everybody has one of those. You cannot have a child without both a mother and a father somewhere in the picture. If you have a single mom, she's got a baby, well, somebody fathered that baby, even if it's a donation deal. Somebody donated whatever it took to bring that child into existence. Every child has a father and mother. And biologically, that's by God's creative design. And the fact that you can't have a child, you can't bring a child into the world without it having both a mother and a father is God's way of telling us, look, this is the way I've designed parenting to work. Let's go to Don in North Carolina. Don, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Good afternoon, sir. I wanted to make a comment about what Heidi was speaking about, in that they're having so much trouble getting foster parents for children. And my wife and I were foster parents for years, but the problem is the county pushes immorality on us by allowing the teen to go out and be on birth control, and she's not even of age of consent, and we have no say in the matter. It was just getting worse and worse, and so I don't blame people for not wanting to be foster parents anymore.
Well, it's interesting, Don. I've got members of my family that are involved in fostering even right now, and it's interesting to look at some of the rules and regulations that they have and whether those things are really in the best interest of the child or not. And what I hear you saying is maybe we need to do something to kind of strengthen these or refine the principles that govern what these county offices do, because sometimes the kind of, quote, parenting they do, end quote, is not good for the foster child. Any reaction to that comment?
That is correct. A child that is already traumatized by being taken out of their home for whatever reason, and then they want to have an immoral lifestyle, or it's almost pushed upon them by the social workers, in my opinion. There may be some social workers that disagree with me on that, but it appears that the child can do just about anything they want to, even though they are not mature enough to make those decisions.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the call, Don. Thank you very much for that. And that is a real problem. I want to be careful here because I don't want to paint everybody with the same brush. I decidedly do not, because I know personally a number of social workers who are doing an absolutely great job. They're trying to bring the same values that you and I bring into raising children into their directing of the foster care situation. So I'm not painting with a broad brush here, but I do think social workers represent a major, major problem right now in trying to get children placed in proper homes. Let's go to Roger in Kelso, Washington. Roger, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate your show, and I pray for you. And I just have a real problem with this James Comey thing. He obstructed justice by doing the job that he did. Why isn't he in prison?
Well, that's a good point, Roger. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. All the focus in my mind has been on the wrong people from the beginning of this. I mean, the focus really ought to be on what went on in the Hillary Clinton campaign, what went on with her and her misuse of the emails, what went on with the lies that they told about the Benghazi raid, what went on with Benghazi, the lack of response to the request for beefed up security there. That is really where the focus ought to be. And some of the skullduggery in the campaign, paying for this dossier and recruiting Russians to be a part of providing the information. There's the collusion with Russia, is with Hillary Clinton's campaign to try to produce this dossier. They paid this guy to go hunt down Russians to dish dirt on Trump. That's collusion to influence the campaign. This dossier, try to bring him down. So anyway, it's a very, very good question, Roger. And that's part of what I was saying earlier. People look at this and they just don't see a very clear standard of justice being applied equally across the board. And that's an American value. That is a preeminent American value, that we are all equal before the law. Whether you are rich or poor, the law sets the same standard for everybody, and we want a justice system that enforces the same set of laws and standards for everybody. Nobody gets cut a break. Everybody is expected to live up to the same standard. All right, good call, Roger. Appreciate that. Let's go to Kevin, Logansport, Indiana. Kevin, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hey, Brian.
Hey.
So I'm amazed that people aren't really seeing the self-confession that Comey does when he says, I was in a world where I knew that Hillary was going to win the election. So he admits then after that what he did was he needed to, in order to preserve the imminent presidency of Hillary Clinton, in order to preserve that, he needed to expose it for a moment so that he could then remove it. So if it came up during her presidency, then the FBI could say, well, that's already been addressed and that's behind us.
Yeah. So, and that's a very, very good point, Kevin, that he was being obviously motivated. He admits it. He was motivated by direct political motives. His motivation in this was not justice, it was politics. It was try to give Hillary a clean bill of health before the election and deal proactively, preemptively with any objections that could be raised about Hillary Clinton. He operated in a world where she was going to be president. That means he just operated inside that D.C. bubble And he's admitting it. The only people I talked to, the only people I heard from, people convinced that Hillary was going to win. He was locked inside that little snow globe, and it affected his judgment. Focal Point, American Family Radio. Good call, Kevin. Thank you. We'll be right back after the news. Stay with us.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
Hello, everyone. Tomorrow begins our American Family Radio Share-a-thon. Our theme this year is In God We Trust. Please join us for Share-a-thon. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to interview a lot of folks. It's just going to be a time of gathering for Christians across the country who listen to AFR. Please support us. Please pray for us because we need a strong Christian voice in radio, and that's AFR.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. The U.S. ambassador to the UN says the United States intends to impose new economic sanctions against Russia for enabling the government of Syrian leader Bashar Assad in the use of chemical weapons. Nikki Haley had said sanctions would be announced today, but in a statement, White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders says only that more sanctions are being considered, and a decision will come soon. A Montana daycare worker is accused of smoking meth on the job. Jeff Manasso has more.
30-year-old Autumn Hines is accused of smoking meth in what's described as a drug den, hidden beneath a cabinet in a laundry room in a Missoula County daycare facility. Police say the drug den was locked from the inside and contained drug paraphernalia. That meth fumes permeated the entire building, including an infant room. Hines was a full-time employee for 3 years there. KRTV reports she faces several counts, including endangering the welfare of a child, criminal possession of dangerous drugs, and criminal mischief. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
The establishment media are still trying to figure out President Trump and are floating every conceivable theory about his success, except that he's a smart man with a lot of good ideas. Steve Jordahl has the latest example.
President Trump gets his policy positions from morning news shows, specifically Fox and Friends, according to the Associated Press. Quoting from the piece, one of its regular viewers is the most powerful person in the world who takes his cues from what he sees. It's no exaggeration to say that Fox and Friends anchors and commentators have effectively become White House policy advisors. Don Irvine of Accuracy in Media thinks the notion is astounding.
To try to say that the President of the United States is taking his policy cues from a morning show, that is dismissive. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Irvine says the president gets daily top-secret intel briefings and has top-flight advisors, which have led President Trump to some unconventional solutions that, for the most part, have been wildly successful. The AP article, he says, is sour grapes.
I think they were being extremely dismissive. They wanted to really kind of put a stake through, the heart of Fox and Friends. But it's a program that a lot of people watch.
And according to Fox and Friends host Brian Kilmeade, who's quoted in the AP piece, there seems to be an understanding between the president and the morning show audience, one that apparently the Associated Press doesn't quite get. I'm Steve Jordahl.
A Kentucky county clerk continues to inspire Christians, but now through her life story. Charlie Butts explains.
Kim Davis, county clerk in Rowan County, has released her book, Under God's Authority, The Kim Davis Story, which details how she made her decision based on her faith and how an elected official captured world attention in an epic conflict over marriage, which sent her to jail. Liberty Counsel founder Matt Staver says it's based on her refusal to sign a marriage license for a homosexual pair.
And then she ended up being the face around the world defending marriage and religious liberty. It's really an amazing story how this woman spent 6 days in jail, the first person to go to jail for their belief in marriage as the union of a man and a woman after the Supreme Court ruling in June of 2015.
Davis once described her life before as a good mother, but not so good otherwise until she made a confession of faith in Jesus.
It's an inspiring, encouraging story, and it's also a challenge for every one of us to stand and how one person can make a difference with Jesus Christ, and in fact how one unlikely candidate was brought into this spotlight and how she weathered the storm.
Not just for herself, but all Christians. As a result, and in the aftermath of lawsuits filed against her, the Kentucky legislature passed a bill that does not require a county clerk's signature on marriage licenses. The book is Under God's Authority, The Kim Davis Story. I'm Charlie Butts.
And home building confidence is sliding for the fourth straight month as steadily rising mortgage rates and sky-high home prices put ownership out of reach for more and more Americans. The National Association of Home Builders Wells Fargo Builder Sentiment Index for April fell 1 point to 69. American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com. I'm Rusty Pugh.
You wish you could stop thinking about it, but you can't. It never quite leaves your thoughts. Even in the joyful moments, it's there. The sadness, shame, and sorrow. You know you can't go on like this, so don't. Phone the International Helpline for Abortion Recovery at 866-482-LIFE. Your call is confidential, and you'll be talking with someone who's already been where you are and found the way out. 866-482-LIFE.
He's exactly the wrong person to have headed the most important law enforcement agency in the United States.
I was operating in a world where Hillary Clinton was going to beat Donald Trump. And so I'm sure that it was a factor. Like I said, I don't remember spelling it out, but it had to have been.
Donald Trump fired him because he didn't trust it. He was right, wasn't he?
I don't think he's medically unfit to be president. I think he's morally unfit to be president.
When you read the stuff that's pouring out of his book, Donald Trump was absolutely right not to trust James Comey.
He began to believe his own press clippings, and it's the biggest danger in public life.
This is a man who is revenge-driven.
James Comey, a man of integrity? As far as I know, I don't.
One of the reasons I'm standing up for the president's civil liberties rights is because the ACLU has fallen asleep on the job.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to the second hour of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Glad to have you on board, however you happen to be listening to us, live streaming us right now on Facebook, live streaming us on YouTube. Got a post on the YouTube page, right, Jeff?
Yeah.
Somebody's enjoying the stream on YouTube now. So 2 different ways you can catch the program live in addition to listening to it on one of our radio stations, 184 stations that comprise the American Family Radio Talk Network, or the American Family Radio Network. And you can listen to podcasts. We have a lot of people follow us on podcasts, hundreds of thousands every month follow this program on podcasts. You can get those by going to the Facebook page. You can get it by going to afr.net. Maybe audio streaming us live by going to afr.net. The audio stream will automatically begin to play. You can listen through your computer. You might be using an app for the iPhone or the Android, listening that way. Don't forget, go to the Focal Point YouTube page and subscribe to the channel. Click on the little bell there that's in the upper right-hand corner, and you'll get a notification every time a new live program of Focal Point begins, and you can always go back to that YouTube page and catch a program that you happen to have missed. You know, we were talking a little bit in the first hour about some of the prosecutorial misconduct here and all this, and, you know, about James Comey and, you know, the question about why he's not in jail. I mean, by his own admission, he admitted that he leaked classified information. The emails that he leaked, remember, he was leaking those emails to his law professor buddy at Columbia, making sure they got into the media to try to provoke a special prosecutor. That was all he engineered that. Well, 4 of the 7 memos that he leaked contained classified information. Those are felony offenses. So why isn't James Comey under investigation? Why isn't he being prosecuted? And you can understand now maybe that had something to do with why he didn't press the Hillary Clinton issue. Because what would he have pressed her on? Sloppy handling of classified information. Well, he couldn't do that without condemning himself. So you get deep enough in the swamp and everybody is sort of infected by the virus. Back to Andy McCarthy's article we touched on the first hour. He said apparently he thinks that prosecutors that are poking into Michael Cohen and Donald Trump are investigating on the theory that Clifford McDougal and perhaps others were defrauded or extorted into silence, and says the fact that they accepted money does not foreclose the possibility that their agreement to remain silent was procured in part by trickery or threats. That may be one of the reasons why Stormy Daniels' attorney is playing up that supposed moment when somebody came up to her in the car, said, "You got a beautiful child there, be a shame if anything happened to her." That was a threat. And maybe her attorney knew we needed to get some kind of a threat in here, because a payment for non-disclosure, nothing illegal about that. It has to be procured by trickery or by threats. I think maybe that's where that is coming from. And the deal here, think about Hillary Clinton. Think about what she did, where she inserted lawyers at various stages in her email scandal just in order to conceal the mishandling of classified information or the destruction of government records or the obstruction of investigations. Remember, she said Cheryl Mills is my attorney. And so because Cheryl Mills was her attorney, then Hillary was claiming attorney-client privilege. I can't talk to you about that. And my attorney can't talk to you about this Benghazi stuff because of attorney-client privilege. Well, Cheryl Mills was not her attorney. He just manufactured that claim kind of on the run. All right, let's go to clip number 4. This is Paul Ryan. Paul Ryan stepped down as Speaker of the House. There's a big question about who is going to take his place. The best choice in my mind is Jim Jordan. And I want to prepare you, ladies and gentlemen. You might want to be prepared to weigh in on that, because the swamp, Jim Jordan is the last guy that the swamp wants, the last guy on planet Earth that they want to be the Speaker of the House, because Jim Jordan's a straight shooter. He shares the same values that you and I do, and unlike a lot of politicians, he's got the spine to stick up for those values even when he gets pushback from the left. Everybody else just folds like a cheap Bedouin tent in a stiff desert breeze. Jim Jordan stands like a rock, like a stone wall, like Stonewall Jackson in the Civil War. And so they know that about him. He's going to do something about this catastrophic debt. We were talking this morning around here about the fact that the rate in which our debt is escalating, going to be $1 trillion this year. And this is on the Republicans, ladies and gentlemen. You can't blame Barack Obama for this. Every last dollar of this $1 trillion deficit you can hang around the neck of the Republicans. They voted for this monstrosity. It's their fault. It's on them. You can't lay this off on the Democrats or lay this off on President Obama or something like this. This is on them. And the rate at which our debt service is escalating, how much we have to spend every year just to pay interest on the debt. And realize we're not paying down the debt. What we're doing right now is kind of what you do when you get a credit card balance that's too high, and all you can do is pay the interest that is due so you don't go for. That's what we're doing right now with our national debt. We're not paying it down. So the principal amount that we owe is continuing to escalate and accelerate and go right up through the ceiling. And the amount that we are spending right now, I don't know what the exact figure is or exact date is, but at the rate we're going now, probably by 2023, somewhere in there, and that's only 5 years from now, the amount of money that we have to pay in interest every year on the national debt will be more than we are spending on the military. We'll spend more money on interest on the debt, not even paying it down, just on interest on the debt, than we spend to outfit our military and provision them for military efforts. So that's how bad things are getting, and of course, nobody's paying any attention to it except the House Freedom Caucus. And that's what everybody knows, that Jim Comey is the guy. Jim Comey. Everybody knows that Jim Jordan will get serious about all that stuff. Now, speaking of Jim Comey and Paul Ryan, which is where I started out before I meandered all over the place, took a squirrel trail through the forest there. Here is Paul Ryan on with Chuck Todd. And Chuck Todd wants to know what Paul Ryan thinks of James Comey, revealing response. Let's listen.
James Comey, a man of integrity? As far as I know, I don't know.
As far as I know. That is a lukewarm endorsement at best. In other words, he's suggesting there's a whole lot of stuff out there I do not know about James Comey, and somewhere in the total tonnage of what I do not know about James Comey, there may be a lot of stuff that raises questions about his integrity. So we've got a couple of more sound bites we'll play for you when we come back out of the break. You might have, we talked some about the pardon for Scooter Libby that Donald Trump gave to Scooter Libby. He was absolutely right to do it. That was just a horrible miscarriage of justice that Scooter Libby wound up behind bars. It was a process crime. He did not out Valerie Plame. That was done by Richard Armitage, and the prosecutor, Pat Fitzgerald, knew that before he threw Scooter Libby in prison. He knew he wasn't the leaker. Back right after this message. Stay with us.
It is so wonderful to be able to listen to the gospel, the opinions, the views, the information that we receive from the right side of the track instead of the left side.
Hi, this is Abraham Hamilton III, and it excites me beyond measure to hear how God is using American Family Radio. He's doing an amazing work here.
What draws me to your station is the opportunity to get involved. I receive action alerts via email on a regular basis, and since I don't watch TV, my news comes from listening to your broadcast, especially today's issues.
God is using American Family Radio to inform, equip, and activate our listeners to strengthen the moral foundations of American culture. Please partner with us in this important effort during our 3-day share-a-thon beginning tomorrow on AFR.
May God continue to provide for many more years as you strive to serve Him.
Okay, so the big question for any decision you're going to make, is this actually going to work? Well, if you've heard about MediShare, which is a brilliant way of sharing healthcare costs, you may have wondered that. Does it work? Well, so did Dr. Stuart Hoover, who initially joined to save a lot of money. The typical family saves about $500 a month. Stuart saved even more.
When we first joined MediShare, we were immediately going from a little over $1,600 a month down to $460 basically a month.
So that's wonderful, but then his wife needed emergency surgery and the bills added up to $160,000.
So we were seeing the bills coming in, and then the bills were being paid. Portions were being shared, and the end result of this is this bill was taken care of.
Yes, MediShare works, and it's so easy to get your questions answered too, so why not? You can call right now. 855-PSALM-23. That's 855-PSALM-23. 855-PSALM-23.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Talking here about the pardon that Donald Trump extended to Scooter Libby. Scooter Libby, remember, worked for George Bush, and he spent some time in prison. No, that was Judith Mueller. I don't know how long he spent behind bars. He eventually got his sentence commuted by President Bush, but President Bush would not pardon him despite repeated appeals from Dick Cheney. Now, Judith Mueller, her testimony was crucial to Scooter Libby winding up behind bars. She's a reporter for the New York Times. She actually spent 85 days in jail protecting her sources, one of whom was Scooter Libby. But she testified in 2007 that she thought that Scooter Libby had discussed Valerie Plame, a CIA agent, and he was accused of leaking her identity to the media. She was supposed to be this deep, dark, secret, undercover CIA agent, and it was a scandal of immense proportions that Scooter Libby would divulge her identity to somebody in the media. But she says in this column for Fox News, after leaving jail and investigating the case, I unearthed, she says, information that convinced me not only that my testimony was in error, in other words, Libby had never talked about Valerie Plame's identity, but that Libby was the victim of an overzealous prosecutor, Patrick Fitzgerald, whose investigation should have ended before it began, just like Bob Mueller's investigation never should have gotten off the ground. She says the first thing she learned was that John Rizzo, who was the CIA's former general counsel and an agency lawyer, disputed Fitzgerald's assertion that Valerie Plame had been a super-secret covert agent. Rizzo said, he was in a position to know, general counsel for CIA, he said dozens, if not hundreds of people in Washington knew that Valerie Plame worked for the CIA. And there's absolutely no evidence that her being outed in the media had damaged any CIA agent, any agent operation, any agent in the field, or anyone else, including Valerie Plame herself. And Prosecutor Fitzgerald knew this, knew that it was no secret that Valerie Plame was a CIA agent, and Fitzgerald will not talk to anybody about the trial, wouldn't talk about why he pursued Libby after he learned early in the inquiry that the source of the leak was not Libby, but Richard Armitage, who was an aide to Secretary of State Colin Powell. But Armitage, the guy, was never punished for supposedly releasing this classified information. So it wasn't a crime to begin with. It wasn't classified. And number two, they got the wrong guy for it. They went after Libby instead of for Armitage. So anyway, Judith Miller, who's a liberal and all that kind of stuff, she's glad that Scooter Libby was pardoned. He deserved it. You know, and Bush was notoriously slow to grant pardons, very stingy with the pardon power. I worked really hard when I was working with a pro-family organization in Idaho. I worked really, really hard to get a guy a pardon from President Bush for a tragic miscarriage of justice in his part by environmental agencies. Man, we've talked about how the EPA just running amok, and they were in this case. And he went to federal prison for about 18 months. Missed 2 Christmases with his family, the last Christmas his wife was ever alive for, missed his daughter's graduation from high school, all because of this trumped-up prosecution. And we did manage to get a pardon appeal on the desk of President Bush his last day in office. We worked as hard and as fast as we could, but we weren't able to get a pardon for our friend. By the way, looking at a story top of the stack here, you know why the commuter trains in California are running so slow? Because there are homeless on the tracks. They've got to stop and they've got to clear the homeless from the tracks. You know how they have those cow catchers on the front of trains? They're going to have to redesign those to scoop up the homeless because they're laying on the tracks and they're wandering around on the rails. So everywhere they go, these trains have to watch out for the homeless on the tracks. You know, I mentioned that connected to this. What did I mean? Oh, yeah. That article that I read parts of last week. In fact, I wrote a column about this. These 2 guys that think America is irretrievably divided. We're divided into 2 camps. We have completely different worldviews, and there's no way to reconcile these worldviews. And so one side or the other has to be defeated. I continue to believe that his analysis is exactly right. One side or the other has to be defeated. Either the regressives are going to win and we're going to become irrelevant, or we are going to win and the regressive point of view is going to be irrelevant, like it was for so many years, a couple hundred years in American history. And I made this point talking to our donors in Wichita. You know, we've always had in American history, we have always had people who denied transcendent truths. We've always had that. They rejected the moral authority of the 10 Commandments. They rejected the existence of God. They rejected the doctrines of Christianity. We've always had that in America. But the difference is in the last 50 years, here's the difference. Before the 1960s, those people were in America, and they were spouting and all that kind of stuff, beating on their pots and everything, but they had no power. They didn't hold any positions of power. Now they hold all the levers of power. You think about the different segments in our culture. Education is run by people with a regressive worldview. Our colleges are run by people with a regressive worldview. The business culture, think about Facebook and think about Twitter. I mean, they are determined to work with our opposition. They're determined to censor conservative thought. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg admitting it, basically, that, yeah, we're liberal. and they are actively repressing and suppressing and censoring conservative thought, like with Diamond and Silk. You know, our political structures are run pretty extensively by regressives. So, you know, a lot of our churches now are being run by regressives. Think about what's happening in the United Methodist Church. Make John Wesley roll over in his saddle blanket to see what's happening in the denomination that he started. By the way, Loretta Lynch, not too happy with James Comey. She released a statement slamming him yesterday afternoon, just before his interview with George Stephanopoulos aired on ABC. She said this: "I have known James Comey almost 30 years. Throughout his time as director, we spoke regularly about some of the most sensitive issues in law enforcement and national security. If he had any concerns regarding the email investigation, classified or not, he had ample opportunities to raise them with me, both privately and in meetings. He never did." So that was one of Comey's complaints about Loretta Lynch, and she said, look, he never talked to me about any of this. So she hits on Comey right before he goes on television with George Stephanopoulos. I got an article here from The Economist talking about how Republicans are less divided on cultural issues than Democrats are. This is an interesting thing because, you know, we tend to look at the Democrats as marching in lockstep. They're unified. They all share the same values, pro-abortion, pro-gay, all that kind of stuff. But this chart finds that there is more unity in the Republican Party. In other words, Republicans, majority, want less government. They want smaller government. They are culturally conservative. You know, liberals want more government and are culturally liberal, but they are more divided. You look at the spray pattern of their views, and it's all over the chart. So there's a myth that the Democrats are united and that the Republicans are not. You know, the Hillary Clinton campaign has been hit with a charge from the FEC that they concealed $84 million in receipts. $84 million. Now, I don't care where you are. That's a lot of money. And they allege, the FEC alleges that $84 million were illegally funneled from the DNC through state party chapters and recycled back into the war chest of Hillary Clinton's campaign. So she's now developing some new problems on the legal front. Well, let's grab an Alan Dershowitz clip number 5. We talked with you about that article from Andy McCarthy indicating that Donald Trump actually, for the first time, McCarthy thinks he may be in some legal jeopardy, not because of Bob Mueller, but because of this investigation that's being carried out on Michael Cohen about the hush money payments to the porn actress and to somebody else who was a model for Playboy, apparently. And that's some kind of investigation into extortion or possible fraud, threats, and so forth. And Alan Dershowitz, Andy McCarthy, look, he could be in legal jeopardy for the first time. And Alan Dershowitz, who's a pretty straight shooter about Donald Trump and his legal situation, actually may agree with Andrew McCarthy on this. Clip number 5.
Do you think that in this instance, insofar as there is an investigation of Michael Cohen, this is where there is jeopardy for the president?
Oh, I think that's very much the case. I've said for months that he has much more jeopardy concerning his pre-presidential business and personal activities. And one of the reasons I'm standing up for the president's civil liberties rights is because the ACLU has fallen asleep on the job. They actually came in and issued a statement justifying and defending the raid without raising issues about clients' confidentiality. And when nobody else is defending the civil liberties of the president, this can establish precedents that could affect us all. So I have to stand up for human rights and civil liberties for a man I didn't vote for.
But that defense only goes insofar as you're talking about those civil liberties. You are not actually saying there's not a problem here for the president.
I've always thought there's a problem.
And that is specifically what here in this case?
The specific problem is his pre-presidential activities, which are not within the scope of the special counsel.
Not within the scope of the special counsel. That's what Mueller is supposed to do. And what Dershowitz is saying, none of the problems that Trump could possibly be facing have anything to do with the campaign, have anything to do with Russia. They have to do with his activities prior to becoming president. But realize that this investigation into Michael Cohen, I mean, it only got started because of the investigation into Donald Trump and the supposed connection with Russia. And I don't know about the fruit of the poisoned tree, but it sounds like you got the fruit of a poisoned investigation here. You know, Mueller extending the reach of his investigation outside his charter, going off the reservation, wandering around in the weeds, and stumbles on this possible legal issue with Michael Cohen and Donald Trump. Nothing to do with what he's supposed to investigate. Refers it out, and Donald Trump could be in some trouble. We'll be right back. Focal Point, American Family Radio.
Are you a responsible person who finds yourself growing deeper and deeper in credit card debt and you're not sure how to fix the problem? Then get ready for a toll-free number that will put you on a path to financial recovery. Trinity Debt Management is a nonprofit organization that will consolidate your accounts into one easy-to-manage monthly payment, put a stop to late fees and over-limit charges, and reduce your interest rates by as much as 60%. You'll save thousands and become debt-free for keeps. It's not a loan. It's a smart way to relieve your stress, meet your obligations, and preserve your self-respect. If your debt has you down, we should talk. Gather up your bills and call this toll-free number for a free, no-obligation debt analysis. 1-800-788-1813. That's 1-800-788-1813. If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
Nearly 1 in 4 pregnancies in America will end in abortion. The Ministry of Preborn provides free ultrasounds for abortion-minded women throughout America. When a mother sees her baby on an ultrasound and hears the baby's heartbeat, she's 80% more likely to keep her baby.
They introduced me to my child for the first time through an ultrasound. I was able to see this life growing inside of me, hear the heartbeat, and nothing else mattered at that point. I wasn't afraid anymore. I got to meet my child for the first time, and it changed everything. I was a mother to be.
Your gift of $140 will cover the cost of 5 ultrasounds. All donations are tax deductible, and 100% of your gift goes to saving babies. To donate, dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby, or donate securely at preborn.com. Your love can save a life.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Video segments of today's program will be posted at afr.net and on the Focal Point Facebook page. You'll also find the best collection of Brian's resources on our Facebook page. If you're on Twitter, be among the very first every morning to find out what the day's show will be about. Just follow Brian at Brian J. Fisher.
Brian J. Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. I want to keep you up to speed on all things cultural. I want to be sure that you are informed on all fronts. Do you guys know what chapelinis are? Rob, do you know?
No, it sounds like Mexican food.
Yeah, it is.
Oh.
It's grasshoppers.
Oh.
And it's become a snack favorite among baseball fans in Seattle. So the grasshoppers start off in Oaxaca, Mexico. That's my favorite.
Oaxaca.
That's my favorite name of a Mexican city, Oaxaca, Mexico. That's where they capture. And I got a picture of a guy out there. Look at that guy out there in the field with his hands trying to grab grasshoppers. Got his hands extended. Anyway, so they capture him down in Oaxaca, Mexico. I'm gonna get a text from Debbie. She hates it when I do that.
Ding.
But so they dehydrate these grasshoppers, and when you eat them, it says if you close your eyes, you might forget you're eating insects. There is no way I'm going to forget I'm eating insects. I don't know about you guys.
I would have to close my eyes.
Not a happening thing. I'd have to close my eyes, but it's because I know what I'm eating. I'm not going to forget what I'm eating. So the crunch mixes with the citrus taste and a hint of chili seasoning. If you fixate on the baseball game, you might be convinced it's just another ballpark snack.
I don't think so.
So they're selling these in 4-ounce cups. So anyway,
how much?
I don't know. It doesn't say how much they charge, but these poor grasshoppers travel 3,000 miles to get to Safeco Field in Seattle.
Wow. I guess there's a distinguished taste, connoisseur of grasshoppers. They have to be from, what's the name of that town again?
Oaxaca. Thanks for thank you, Jeff, for setting me up and getting me in even more trouble with the executive producer.
You know, the picture you showed reminded me of when we were kids out catching grasshoppers. You know, but we weren't eating them.
Well, apparently that's how they harvest them. I can't believe they just go out there and have to harvest them one fistful at a time. So, anyway, a couple of yesterday was the anniversary. Oaxaca. Yesterday was the anniversary of the Titanic sinking. I had like 11 trivia facts about the sinking. Two of them stuck out to me. I'm going to share with you. The richest passenger on board the Titanic was John Jacob Astor IV. He had a net worth of what would amount to $2 billion today, and he did not survive the tragedy. You know what his last words were? He was saying this to a waiter. Remember, this was a luxurious thing. It was designed to, I think, reflect the Ritz Hotel in New York. He said to the waiter, "I asked for ice, but this is ridiculous."
Oh, man.
Those were his last reported words. And then the youngest passenger on board the ship, Astor was the richest. The youngest was Melvina Dean, 2 months old at the time. She survived to the age of 95. Died on May 31st, 2009. So that's it for the Chapelinis, the crunchy citrus-flavored grasshoppers. Now let's grab clip number 6. This is Alan Dershowitz talking about James Comey. And you listen to what he says about James Comey, a guy that, in his view, completely unqualified to be in charge of an investigation of anything. And you think about all of this starting with Comey, all of this starting with him pushing this FISA, to get this FISA warrant with this. Well, he even called it a salacious and unverified dossier. Remember that? James Comey called it unverified. This was after they'd already gotten the warrant. So, again, trying to cover his tracks. And this is what Alan Dershowitz says about James Comey. Clip 6.
This is a man who is revenge-driven, who was prepared to leak through a law professor at Columbia, who was prepared to disclose confidential conversations he had with the president-elect and the president of the United States. He's exactly the wrong person to have headed the most important law enforcement agency in the United States. This sends a horrible message to FBI agents and law enforcement people about leaking and about confidences and about trying to keep emotion out of law enforcement and politics out of law enforcement. For him to start speculating on that kind of nonsense and rubbish and not to disclose when he spoke to the president, as you said, that this information was paid for by a political opponent.
So, in other words, Dershowitz says, look, this guy's not qualified. You know, and we've suspected this from the beginning. And I want to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, when I went into this whole deal, my impression of James Comey had been formed by what I had read about him. Everything I read about him, this guy's a straight shooter. He's a man of integrity. He's upright. He just follows the truth wherever it leads. He's a man that plays by the book. He upholds the rule of law. That's the way I saw James Comey. And I had to be dissuaded of that view of him by the way he conducted himself. I no longer have that assessment of James Comey. There are still some people in Congress like Trey Gowdy that think the world of Bob Mueller, think the world of James Comey. I do not count myself among them. You know, and Dershowitz points out that, look, this guy leaked classified information. We talked about that earlier. Leaked classified information through a law professor at Columbia, specifically for the purpose of generating interest in a special counsel. So you talk about he violates the law, divulging classified information, and it's not for any noble purpose. He wants to get a special counsel to try to take Trump out. I mean, this stuff just starts to get more bizarre the further into it that you go. You know, and Dershowitz, in his view, Comey's is revenge-driven. You want an FBI director who is justice-driven. And he says James Comey is not that kind of a guy. So again, I'm looking at this whole thing about Trump as the fruit of a poisoned investigation. You know, if this whole thing started on kind of a scummy, ill-founded basis, you know, if you illegally search a guy's car and you find something that would incriminate him, you can't use it. It's the fruit of the poison tree. You had no legal right to be in his car. Anything you find is inadmissible in court. Now let's go to Piers Morgan, clip number 7. You know, I don't know exactly where Piers lines up on the political spectrum, but he's not a arch conservative. We know that for sure. He's on with Sean Hannity, and he's talking about what the Comey book reveals about Comey. Let's listen.
And it makes me think this. Donald Trump fired him because he didn't trust him, right? Well, he was right, wasn't he? When you read the stuff that's pouring out of his book, Donald Trump was absolutely right not to trust James Comey. And in relation to the wider Mueller probe, I just think what's happening here is that they tried to get the proof on Russian collusion. They want to prove to the world that Donald Trump collaborated with Russians to fix the election. That's why he won. No other reason. Has to be that. And so far, they have singularly failed to establish that. So now they're moving the goalposts. Now they're moving to stuff about his private life with alleged allegations involving women going back more than 10, 15 years. I don't think people care about Donald Trump's sex life. To me, they're now going after him purely to embarrass him, purely to try and diminish him, to degrade him as president. And I think that this is because they're unable to get the Russia collusion line to stick.
All right, so Piers Morgan say, look, what James Comey's book does is it verifies and confirms that Trump was exactly right to cut this guy loose. This is a guy that was not trustworthy, couldn't be trusted with the responsibilities of being the FBI director. He correctly affirms that this whole approach to these hush payments, all of this is just politically driven. They're not looking for justice here. They're looking for some way, you know what Piers Morgan says, to try to diminish and degrade him. No, Piers, they're trying to destroy him as president. They're looking for impeachment material to try to get rid of him, get him out of office altogether. One last clip before we go to your phone calls. Let's go to clip number R2, and this is a clip that features a woman by the name of Amy Wax. Now, Amy Wax is a law professor at University of Pennsylvania, and she's been a highly regarded law professor. She's been there for a long time, got tenure, the whole 9 yards, and she's been yanked from teaching first-year students at Penn Law. Of course, she taught all the time about, I don't know what it was, legal process or whatever, but a standard class that she taught in the School of Law, and she's been told you can't teach that course anymore. And the reason is that she wrote an op-ed with another professor that said not all cultures are the same. Not all cultures are equally productive. Not all cultures are equally advanced. Not all cultures are equal in preparing people to be productive in an advanced economy. She mentions the culture of the Plain Indians, for instance, was designed for nomadic hunters. Nothing wrong with that, but her point is it was not designed for a first world 21st century environment. Nor, she says, are the single parent antisocial habits prevalent among some working class whites, the anti-acting white rap culture of inner city blacks, the anti-assimilation ideas gaining ground among some Hispanic immigrants. These cultural orientations are not only incompatible with what an advanced free market economy and a viable democracy require, they are also destructive of a sense of solidarity. You know what I think I'm going to do, Rob? I think I'm going to save the soundbite of her for after the break so I can get some of this content out. We're going to listen to her talk about her experience. And she says, look, not all culture is equally adept at producing people who can be productive in a modern and contemporary environment. And if we get all hung up on this identity stuff and embracing cultures that have proven that they're incapable of producing what we need in modern citizens, that does not make a lot of sense. Would the re-embrace of bourgeois norms by the ordinary Americans who have abandoned them significantly reduce society's pathologies? There is every reason to believe so. By bourgeois norms, she's talking about all the things that it's culturally trendy to reject. The values of religion, the values of the Ten Commandments, the values of patriotism, the values of our founding documents, the values of American achievement and American accomplishment. Would these improve America's social pathologies? There is every reason to believe so. Among those who currently follow the old precepts, their level, the homicide rate is tiny, opioid addiction is rare, poverty rates are low. It worked then, it'll work now, and it'll work tomorrow.
Washington Watch advances a culture where human life is valued and religious liberty thrives.
Hello, this is Tony Perkins, host of Washington Watch, right here on the American Family Radio Network, inviting you to join us each weekend for the weekend edition of Washington Watch for the latest from our nation's capital on what is happening as it pertains to faith, family, and freedom. You'll hear from policymakers, congressional leaders, and others each day, 4 p.m. Central Time. Be there.
The sexual revolution has falsely promised to satisfy the human heart. The promise of freedom has turned out to be a new kind of bondage.
Here's the good news. God has a better way. If we follow God's prescription.
Dr. Michael Brown offers hope for those trapped in the downward spiral of sexual immorality. The Freedom of Sexual Purity is a powerful DVD from the AFA Cultural Institute. Get your copy today at afastore.net.
Hi, I'm J.J. Jasper. Do you know what a snail says riding on a turtle's back? Whee! That's how I feel about being at this year's Fishbowl Retreat. I'll be sharing some laughs and encouragement with you, and my wife Melanie will be speaking as well.
The annual AFA Pastors and Wife Fishbowl Retreat is coming October 9th through the 11th, and already the event is filling up. Our host will be Pastor Bert Harper of Exploring the Word and his wife Jan. And our guest speakers will be AFR morning personality J.J. Jasper and his wife Melanie. Come refresh, renew, and relax. The AFA Fishbowl Retreat will be held at Linden Valley Conference Center in Linden, Tennessee. Registration is limited to the first 35 couples. Register soon by calling 800-326-4543 extension 300 or visit repairingthefoundations.net.
Come join us at the annual AFA Fishbowl Retreat, October the 9th through the 11th.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Focal Point. Brian Fisher.
Hi, welcome back to Focal Point with Brian Fisher, home of Muscular Christianity on Conservative Talk Radio. You might have heard about Cory Booker going off on Mike Pompeo, who is a very strong believer, by the way. Committed to his values, didn't back down, didn't weaken when he was pushed on gay marriage. Said, look, Senator, I believe that gay marriage was inappropriate back in the day. I still believe that. My views on that have not changed. But Cory Booker is going to vote against him. Now, he's trying to pretend it's for other reasons. But Cory Booker, who is gay himself, is saying, I'm going to vote against Mike Pompeo because he's, in Cory Booker's view, is a homophobe. So I'm going to vote against him because of his religious beliefs. So what is Cory Booker doing? He is applying a religious test to the office of Secretary of State. The Constitution, Article 6, flatly prohibits the use of any religious test for federal office. And Cory Booker says he's not qualified because he doesn't love the people. No. Cory Booker. You think he's unqualified because he's not affirming a sexually non-normative lifestyle. All right, let's go to Amy Wax, clip number 2. Remember, she's the one that believed basically that classic American values, white European cultures with American values, that they are the best suited to prepare people for a 21st century environment. She got suspended from a stellar law career at Penn Law, and here she describes what happened to her, clip R2.
My saga, as Peter says, began on August 9th of last year when I published an op-ed with a co-author, Larry Alexander, about paying the price for the breakdown of the country's bourgeois culture. The piece touted a renewed embrace of bourgeois values, a revival of the well-worn cultural script for mature adulthood that had prevailed before the 1960s. And in what became the most controversial passage, we pointed out that cultures are not equal. Some are more successful than others in preparing people to be productive citizens in a modern technological society. In an interview the next day for the school newspaper, I defended that assertion. I used the phrase, some cultures are functionally superior, by pointing to how people vote with their feet. I noted that global migrants flock to white European countries. They don't risk their lives in rickety boats to go to Venezuela or Zimbabwe. Our piece created an immediate firestorm. Petitions from groups at Penn and elsewhere labeled me a racist, a white supremacist, xenophobe, hater, and the familiar litany.
So that's what happened to her. She got accused, had every name in the book thrown at her. And remember, you know, the left thinks that name-calling is a form of debate. They think it's a form of argument, that it's a form of discussion. You know, and Jonah Goldberg wrote a book a number of years ago called The Tyranny of Cliches. And he made the observation that, look, by the way, I never gave the phone number. The phone number is 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840 is the number to call. And I forgot where I was. Rob, do you remember what I was just talking about just before I started talking about the phone number, 888-589-8840? What was I talking about? Talking about
I was right there with you.
Bourgeois values or something like that, yeah. And then I lost it. But anyway, what Amy Wax says is that if we are going to get back to classic American values, this is similar to that column that we read about America being hopelessly divided, and the fact that she got cashiered is an indication of that. She's out of a job. Well, she's been suspended anyway, because she dares to believe and advocate in op-eds for classic American values, for white European Christian values, the values that made Europe the leading continent in the world and made America the leading nation in the world. Then she makes the point, look, people are trying to break in to, where are they trying to break into? They're trying to break into white European cultures and nations. There's a reason for that. It's because of what they offer. It's not because they're racists. It's not because they prefer whites over everybody else. It's just that they have produced a culture that they recognize is superior to their own. And it is based on Christianity. It's not based on race. European nations are not culturally advanced because they're white. They're culturally advanced because they're built on Protestant Christianity. That's why they are culturally advanced. And that's why people want to break into these countries. They want to break into America. They're not trying to break into Venezuela. They're not trying to break into Zimbabwe because there's nothing culturally advanced about those cultures. And for her trouble, she has been suspended. And she said this, if we're going to get back to what she calls the hegemony of the bourgeois culture, we usually think of bourgeois as a term that refers to kind of hoity-toity rich people. It doesn't. It refers to the average, ordinary people. So talking about average, ordinary culture, bourgeois culture, that this would be the one that average, ordinary Americans would have. And she says, we need to get back to that. We need to get back to the bourgeois values that made America great. How are we going to do that? We have to have the arbiters of culture, the academics, the media, and Hollywood relinquish multicultural grievance polemics. That is all the stuff that's identity-based, all the stuff that's based on race, all these shallow and false accusations about racism every time you turn around. They have to abandon that. They got to give it up. And the preening pretense of defending the downtrodden. Remember, this is what liberals say. They're the ones that claim that they're the ones that care for the downtrodden and they care for the poor, and they don't. Their policies invariably hurt the poor and harm the poor. So they got to give up that pretense that what they're really about is helping the poor. Instead of bashing the bourgeois culture, they should return to the 1950s posture of celebrating it. So here's a law professor at Penn Law saying we need to get back to the values that we honored and embraced as a culture in the 1950s. And I'm down with that. You didn't have to lock your cars, didn't have to lock your houses, could go out at night without worrying about getting mugged or carjacked. All right, let's go to the phones, 888-589-8840. Let's grab a call from Barry in McKinney, Texas to start with. Barry, what's on your mind? Talk to me.
2 cents worth.
Yes, sir.
I think that McCabe and Comey are taking this adamant, unqualified stand. We're innocent. Trump is the bad guy. I suspect it's a takeoff from what Clinton did when he was advised by some Hollywood friend. If you're going to go out there and lie about your sexcapades, make a firm stance and unequivocal. The next day he gave that speech, I did not have relations with that woman.
Yeah,
I think maybe that's what Comey is doing.
I don't think you're right about that. You know, and McCabe, this is interesting. You know, McCabe did a GoFundMe thing for his legal expenses. He raised $500,000. He raised $500,000 for his legal defense, and then the report of the Inspector General comes out. After he'd raised all this money from poor innocent dupes that thought he was as pure as the driven snow, this Inspector General report comes out, and it finds that he was fired for cause. I mean, I read the whole thing over the weekend. It's extensive, 39 pages worth, but very detailed about the times that he lied to people in the FBI and lied to protect his own actions. 3 times. Lack of candor is just an FBI word for lying, cashiered for cause. So where do those people that paid money, where do they go to get their $500,000 back? That's what they want to know. Let's go to Barbara, Pineville, Louisiana. Barbara, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hi. Well, the guy from Texas said what is on my mind partially about sex in the president's office that was, overlooked, and it was okay to do that.
Uh-huh.
But we're Christians. We're supposed to be forgiving and forgive people, give them a chance. And I feel like that Mr. Trump is getting a really, really bad deal out of the so-called Democrats. I call them communists myself. But, it's really sad. But the other thing is, in forgiveness, that has to be between a husband and wife if a man has done or a woman has done something they're not supposed to do. And they have to ask forgiveness for God. And if Trump did anything, it was before he came in office. We didn't vote for his sex life. We voted for him for cleaning the swamp and making changes.
Yeah. All right, Barbara, listen, I appreciate the call. And one other point here that Barbara's kind of pointing us toward is that, and this is what Dershowitz has been complaining about, we're at the point now where they are out to get Trump no matter what it takes, including criminalizing political differences. And again, this is of a piece with what we see from the left. Remember, if you disagree with the left, they don't think, well, you just disagree with me. They think that you are evil. They think that you need to be silenced. You need to be punished. They criminalize differences in point of view. So if you think maybe that homosexuality is an unhealthy lifestyle, maybe we shouldn't celebrate it and promote it, they think you are a hater. They think you are an evil, wicked person. It's not that you just disagree with us on whether homosexuality is good or bad. You are a bad, bad person. Let's go to Kevin in Wichita, Kansas. Welcome, Kevin. What's on your mind?
Yeah, earlier you had the switch to the topic about name calling, and then you said, I forgot to give the number. And then when you went to get back on topic, you forgot what it was. So you were getting ready to switch over to the topic of name calling.
All right.
Politics.
Okay.
Steers you that way.
All right. Well, thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that. Thanks for looking out for me. And I'm not sure exactly where I was going with that thing, but, I guess the point I was making is, look, on the left, they think that name-calling is a form of discussion. But it's not, and Jonah Goldberg's point was they use cliches like Islamophobe, xenophobe, homophobe. They use those to terminate discussion. They believe that's their trump card. They think if they can call you a hater, if they can call you a homophobe, if they can call you a racist, then they have disqualified you from opening your mouth ever again. You're no longer eligible to participate in public dialogue. They don't have to make an argument. They're just going to call you a name. Don't forget to bow low before God, stand tall before man, stand in the gap. Never forget we're fighting a winnable war. See you tomorrow.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
Hello, everyone. Tomorrow begins our American Family Radio Share-a-thon. Our theme this year is In God We Trust. Please join us for Share-a-thon. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to interview a lot of folks. It's just going to be a time of gathering for Christians across the country who listen to AFR. Please support us. Please pray for us because we need a strong Christian voice in radio, and that's AFR.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.